Do you think one reason liberalism has permeated American culture is that TV, surfing the net, and other leisure activities have replaced reading? Well, you're the guy to ask, Dr. Wiker.
Wow. Boy, and you asked that. I believe that is true. In fact, I wrote an article for Human Events called "The Importance of Not Being Stupid," which was
I love that.
It's a kind of a catchy play on an old play, "The Importance of Being Earnest." But the point of it is that there are actually scientifically verified effects on the human mind and its deformation by surfing the net. We lose the capacity to think deeply, and conservatism is about thinking deeply. It really is. When you go through these texts, you will feel, that kind of depth that awakens the soul, and that's what we need. That experience lets you know what a human being is. So I absolutely do, and I'll just say this out. I'm not bragging or anything. I'm just saying it's one of the best decisions my wife and I ever made. We got rid of our television 28 years ago. My 7 children have never had television in the house. To be honest with you, the last show we ever watched was Dallas, and we felt so, doesn't that date things, huh?
Yeah.
And we felt so nauseous deep in our souls that the next day we sold the thing for $25, I remember.
Oh, speaking about Dallas, how about Aristotle? I mean, he makes it in your book. A lot of people won't think of him as a conservative. Is he sort of like a founding father of this thought? Or this?
Yeah, I think that we need to go back to him. One of the mistakes that conservatives can make, they think that conservatism is an American invention or discovery, and that wouldn't make it very deep. What were all those people doing, blindly wandering around before then? It's just not so. It would mean that conservatism wasn't rooted in human nature and available to others who would look into our natural depths. And Aristotle is, again, as you say, I would argue the father of political conservatism. And when you read through his politics, you see so many of the fundamental principles brought forth for the first time with wonderful cogency and compelling. And you also see a lot of surprising insights into our own time, because he talks about what happens when things go wrong. And one of the things I treat is his treatment of what's called, I think Plato was the first to do this, extreme democracy, when a democracy caves in because people in it believe that the freedom to do whatever they want is, as it were, their fundamental goal and desire and right.
Hey, my question is, how come conservatives aren't really conservative? I mean, I guess what I mean by that is I feel like I'm more conservative than conservatives are, conservative politicians. And is it a matter of, are people really that insincere and they'll just say anything to be elected and then do whatever they want when they get in there? Or is it a matter of, as you seem to be saying about your book, that we're reading the wrong things and we don't really know how to act conservatively on principle once elected? So.
Yeah, I think it's when you say what you mean, I'm taking it is that the popular conservatives, the ones that are most vociferous and have their own programs, really aren't conservative with any kind of a depth. And I think that's
so much
right.
more eloquent than what I said, but yes, that's exactly what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Okay. So what? I mean, I find the same thing. I'm thinking what we need is for these people to stop, everyone to stop talking, these people to stop talking, and read the books that really defined conservatism by getting into the depths of human nature, what it means to be a rational animal, what it means to be a moral animal, what it means to be an economic animal, what thing are we, and what wisdom can we glean from previous ages, from human experience. That's what a conservative does. He looks backwards for wisdom rather than forwards to some kind of an imaginative utopia. And I just don't see the kind of depth of education, of reading and reflection in popular conservatism. I think that's why they're lost. Although there are some signs of hope. When Glenn Beck was pushing Friedrich Hayek, Hayek was on the bestseller list for, outselling even vampire romances for 2 or 3 weeks. And that's a good thing. Now, I hope that all the people that got the book read the book and think deeply about it, because that's what being a conservative mind is, thinking deeply about the most important and permanent things.
I guess you could trace the difference between conservatives and liberalism by the books Oprah recommends and those that Glenn Beck recommended.
Somewhat, although I obviously have, because of the title of my book, the last line is that there's an impostor, I believe, among popularly taken conservative writers, and that's Atlas Shrugged. And I know that Glenn Beck loves Atlas Shrugged, and many conservatives do, but my longest chapter is devoted to Ayn Rand and why it is that Atlas Shrugged really is not a
it's part of the reason because of her lack of she was an atheist, I guess, basically. And moral, she doesn't believe in a moral order, I don't think, or her own moral order.
She believed that moral order could come simply from pursuing self-interest, and she didn't even mean that in an 18th century or 19th century way. She meant it a radical kind of concern for the self.
Yeah.
And that is why, above and beyond all things, and that is why her own life was the best test case for her philosophy. And if you look at her life, it was a miserable failure.
Oh, yeah, I've seen the movie a couple of times. So she wasn't talking about the invisible hand in any way.
She didn't know. Her concern was really not questions about how it is that if you keep a centralized government out of it, that things will kind of settle in a sort of more of a stasis rather than being stirred up by a central government. Her concern was that certain individuals, in a kind of a Nietzschean way, are allowed the maximizing of their abilities without restrictions. And that's a whole different thing. She's not concerned about an economic order or the kind of arguments you would find in Hayek. She's concerned with a kind of a Nietzschean individualism.
I had a question about, I have a lot of friends that they're not really Christians. Some of them are, but they're not real strong believers. And they say that all, Republicans and conservatives, that's all, the real holy rollers of them all. But I mean, that's not always the case, though, right? I mean, being conservative isn't just, biblical based and all that kind of thing. It's a way of life, not a way of life, but that.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I make the argument in 10 Books Every Conservative Must Read that ultimately conservatism is a natural principle. That is, it's not identical to Christianity. It can relate to Christianity because Christianity takes nature to be the foundation of grace and builds upon it. The created order is good, even if fallen. But there are many conservatives, and we begin the book with Aristotle. He's a pagan who turned to the natural order as the moral order. And understood that as defining what are proper and improper actions. So you can be what I call a natural law conservative. You will affirm the existence of God and the moral order that comes from Him, but you may or may not be a Christian. So it's conservatism is in a way broader than Christianity, even while the natural order forms the foundation of both.
Ben, what's the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution from a conservative standpoint?
A lot. At least we didn't kill that many of our own people, and that's an indication. Edmund Burke is beautiful on this, his reflections on the Revolution in France. What you see in the French Revolution is a revolution fundamentally defined by the new secular spirit and essentially antagonistic to the Roman Catholic Church, but to Christianity at large, not just Roman Catholicism. So it's the first radical secular revolution that meant to upseat all previous sources of moral and political order and simply expunge Christianity from the scene and begin with a new kind of secular religion based, so they say, on reason. Hundreds of thousands slaughtered in light of that goal. It's the sort of the premonition of what's going to happen with Marxism. So it's a fundamental difference. America Revolution began really 200 years before the Revolution. You have people coming over here and setting up moral order, political order, social order from the ground up within their families. They're governing themselves. They're setting up their own economies from the ground up. They are in charge of their own moral and economic and political lives, and it blossoms from that over 2 centuries. By the time you get to the American Revolution, all that Americans want to do is keep this wonderful order that they build up. they don't want to be tyrannized by a foreign power or used as a mere instrument for, Britain's imperialistic goals, or at least to make up the tax base of the money it was losing from international wars.
Another book I went out and bought because you recommended. I didn't have it. I have another one. I have the regular Catholic Bible. You recommended the Jerusalem Bible.
Yes.
How is that conservative, and would the St. King James version of her also qualify?
Yeah, well, this will raise some hackles, so I'll be as delicate as I can.
Okay, please do.
Well, as I set forth, the Jerusalem Bible is translated, I think, closer to the original Hebrew. Mm-hmm. That is, it sounds more like something that you would see like in Homer's Iliad.
Oh, okay.
And something that would come out of a primitive society in which people have, they fight with swords and spears in hand-to-hand combat. So it's got that kind of immediacy that a really good translation of Homer's Iliad has. It reads a lot like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, another epic that takes those things into account. So you get that kind of, a kind of fundamental, brutal, primitive language that goes with the kind of society from which it came. Mm-hmm. That I think awakens us. We're too used to reading the Bible.
Right. I started reading. I just finished Genesis last night. I'm going to read it real slow. Probably take me 5 years. But it really has a nice, you would say, Jewish feel to it, at least in the early
That's the other thing. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It uses the name Yahweh rather than Lord.
Right.
And I think that's important because you get the feeling of a people who really has a personal God. Mm-hmm. Because we use Lord in a way that it can attach to almost anything.
Yeah, right.
But here, this is a personal tribal God, mm-hmm. and you can't get around the fact that the Jews were a tribe.
Right,
God chose to become to reveal Himself specifically to a certain tribe of people. Mm-hmm. And as I remark in my book, we need to get uncomfortable with who these people are. They're not like us. Mm-hmm. And that's we need to recover what they were really like in order to understand the revelation, and it's far more powerful, I think, because of that.
I got a quick question about you use both Federalist and Anti-Federalist in your book. How can you use both of them?
This exactly right. The Anti-Federalists need to be recovered. I can guarantee that about 95% of the conservatives, people who say, I'm a conservative, if they would read the Anti-Federalists, they would say, aha, that's my home. Those are the people that state it most clearly. Now, what's ironic about that, or at least instructive, is that these were the folks in the constitutional debates about ratification, that is, about ratification of the Constitution, who were arguing that the Constitution gave too much power to the federal government. Even with all its checks and balances, even with all its wisdom, too much power. These were the folks that were pushing for a strong Bill of Rights mm-hmm. to be attached to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And what is important about them, over and above that, or as part of that, is they are the prophets. They are the ones that their warnings about too much power flowing to the federal government through the power of taxation, through some of the loose language in the Constitution, from the way that the Supreme Court was set up. The Anti-Federalists are arguing you're going to end up with an enormously powerful federal government through internal taxation powers, in which the Congress, National Congress, will trump the state Congresses, and the Supreme Court, as it's set up, will become the defining tyrants of all law, by defining the law and then then Congress picking up their definitions to reformulate the country in accordance with a centralized government.
After you've been listening to Dr. Ben Wiker talk about his book, 10 Books Every Conservative Must Read, I got a little homework for you. I want everybody, in line of one of the callers we had, to make a deal with your best liberal friend or friends. Challenge them that you will give them one conservative book and they will give you one liberal book, and you're each going to read each other's side, so to speak. And let's see who wins on that. Because this is the book to use. 10 Books Every Conservative Must Read